Hello, good evening. What are you guys? My Justice Warriors live chat. Okay. Um, it's so disorienting being in this other space, my auxiliary studio. And I think tomorrow I'll be back in my main studio. So that'll be good because I just kind of get disjointed. The lighting's all weird. And then when you make adjustments, everything changes. So I will give folks a minute to find the live stream. I had been on a few minutes ago, but I had to turn it off because I didn't have any volume and I was having issues with my hair and my hat and everything. Anyway, so everything I say is simply my opinion for the sake of hoping to start a conversation, open up a discussion, learn something, be educational. All of my videos are made for the tube of you, and it's an infotainment platform. So let's see if I can adjust things without knocking things over, without making it worse. See if I can make it better without making it worse. So, I did my thing. Please hit your like button as you come in if you don't mind. Make sure you're still subscribed. Share a video of mine with somebody that you think might like my channel. And what else? Turn on your notification bell to ring. So it's the day after Christmas. I hope people had a lovely Christmas. I have turned off my monetization because I don't want people to get interrupted from viewing. And I didn't know that happened. I don't know how to manage this crap. But if anybody wants to say hello, so I know that you're there and I know you can hear me, it looks like my sound is working. I will just try to get started. Primarily, I wanted to talk about the tragedy with the devastating loss of Rob Reiner and his gorgeous wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, and the horrific tragedy that the family has been suffering ever since the first day of Hanukkah. So it's pretty overwhelming. And then, I have this theory that it's like just when you think it couldn't possibly be worse, in comes Biggly Piggly with his effing Truth Social post that is just the most despicable Truth Social post I've ever seen in my life. And probably a lot of folks agree with me. It blows my mind that even somebody that would support him would think that would be okay, even if they didn't like that director, rise above it. Like, put on your big girl panties and be the adult. And, you can gloat all you want, but to put that out there. So, I think that threw a lot of people for thinking that, I don't know why anyone thought he wouldn't go that low, because I'm in the same camp as his niece, Mary Trump, which is that there is no bottom. When it comes to Biggly Piggly, there is no bottom. And just when you thought it couldn't be any worse, like for the Reiner family, enter Biggly Piggly and his slop of concepts, or lack of concepts. Anyway, I want to just give full respect to the Reiner family, and I've been on this idea of thinking that perhaps Biggly Piggly made some sort of confession in that post when he essentially blamed the victim and said Rob Reiner caused his own death with his Trump derangement syndrome, which angered somebody. Like, really specific constructs that he actually passed away from his Trump derangement syndrome and angering other people. So I explained this in my last video. It was the day after learning about it that I was just, doing housework and not really thinking about it. And it just kind of came to me that it was reminiscent of that weird post that he made back in January when that horrific plane crashed above the Potomac River, crashed into a Black Hawk helicopter, or the Black Hawk helicopter crashed into the commercial jet. And pretty quickly, Biggly Piggly put up a post and said, DEI is dangerous, and, implying that the accident was caused by DEI. And then come to find out a few days later that that it was probably the female that was the pilot. She was a co-pilot, and I don't know for a fact that she was the one flying the plane, but a 28-year-old woman was one of the 3 Army soldiers that were on the Black Hawk. And, dismantling the DEI was already well underway. As soon as he put up that post, they started tearing up the diversity, equality, inclusion programs. And in Trump's post, he was essentially stating a new medical diagnosis, this TDS, as he calls it. And then he was essentially commandeering the role of the medical examiner and determining the cause of the loss of life. And it made me wonder if there might be something to that. So I know that it's pretty out there, and I'm not saying that I believe this to be the case. In fact, to be completely honest, I probably believe that this isn't the case, but I think it's important to explore the idea. And as far as the research goes that I've looked at, it almost seems like the authorities are looking into it as well, because immediately the authorities knew that Rob Reiner and Biggly Piggly had been having a public beef for 10 years. And then in 2017, Rob Reiner started a nonprofit. I think the name of the committee is something as simple as Russian election interference. So he started that in 2017, in his own words, to be a place where they can compile all the information that they find about Russian interference in our American elections. And then it can be like a go-to website that the public can just look up whatever they want to look up. And it's my understanding that that group, that committee, was formed and then deconstructed 18 months later. However, he had been working on a mini-series at the time of his passing. Miniseries had a name, and the name is The Spy and the Asset. And it was to be a 10 to 13 part documentary series about the relationship between Daddy Vladdy and Biggly Piggly. So he had not successfully gotten a network yet to commit to producing it or having it on their channel. I would imagine that a lot of people were afraid to, right? I mean, especially when you look at what's been going on with networks and Biggly Piggly's interference. So another aspect that the authorities recognized right away is that they knew that Michelle Singer had taken the photograph for the cover of his iconic book, The Art of the Deal, that he had hired Michelle Singer to take that portrait of himself back in 1987 was when the book was published. And so he knew her. He had a professional interaction with her. Maybe that's the only time he interacted with her, but still, it was odd that he would be making this post and not just mentioning, I knew this photographer, I hired her once. But he didn't say that. And in my opinion, it's very suspicious when that type of information is omitted. It raises a red flag. So it's my opinion that this concept of the possibility of our rageful toddler dictator wannabe, that he could potentially have some loose affiliation to what happened with Rob Reiner and Michelle. It seems abundantly clear that their son Nick did this, and there's been a lot of evidence and information to make that assertion an allegation and then wait for the facts to fall into place. But when you think about things like the the Charles Manson homicides, when you think about things like that movie Jacob's Ladder, that type of like rugging, let's say, and brainwashing and controlling people, it happens. It's real. It's not like a left field type of concept. It definitely happens. And it happens over a prolonged period of time. It doesn't just happen overnight. So I think that there is a possibility that Daddy Vladdy would have gladly tried to intervene with Rob Reiner's ability to put that docuseries out there for public consumption. And I think that it's entirely possible that Biggly Piggly did too. But I'm very hesitant to keep going on about that concept because it's just such a raw, tragic situation. And I have learned a lot more, of course, we probably all have, about what happened that night and the series of events. And it's important to note that the Reiner home was wired with surveillance inside and out. I would imagine that Conan O'Brien's home was wired with surveillance inside and out as well. In this day and age, rich, famous folks cannot be safe enough. And, you want to have videotape of everything. I mean, I worked in a fancy hotel where we had videotape of everything and we could zoom in. I mean, of course, not in people's rooms, but in all corners of the hotel. And it was a very sophisticated system. And I think that the digital information, it lasted for at least like 60 days, maybe 90 days before it would, get automatically tape recorded over. Anna Bees, hi there, dear. How are you? Thanks for coming in. How's your Christmas? Also, Michelle Singer wore like what do you call these dumb things? Smartwatch. So there's that. They have a lot of digital information to know exactly what happened. Like they know that there was no forced entry into the house. I think that it happened at about 1:30 in the morning. I'll go through some of the information that I have heard from different sources online that seems pretty accurate in my opinion, but of course we don't know yet definitively. I hope everyone had a good Christmas too. I had to work, but I celebrated on Christmas Eve. Well, that's lovely that you could celebrate Christmas Eve, and I'm sorry you had to work. Are you working tonight? I had to take the wax off my top braces because it was like turning orange because I ate tomato soup with the wax on, and I haven't had a chance to redo the wax, and maybe I will do that quickly so that I don't lose the ability to talk with kind of, the sharp metal just kind of tears up the inside of my mouth as I'm speaking. So forgive me while I do my silly little wax thing. Hopefully it won't gross anybody out. I've got my little scissors. I've got so many containers of this wax. But let me see if I can do this successfully. Like I said, without grossing anybody out. No, I'm not working tonight, but I will work Saturday and Sunday night. Well, I appreciate what you do for people. I believe, in my opinion, nursing is one of the most noble professional fields that anybody can do. And my son that's in the Navy, he's training to be a nurse practitioner. He's in, what is he in? B school, I think. A school, B school, C school. I forget how they do it. But that was his idea when he joined joined the military. I got like a hair stuck in the wax. When he joined the military, he was doing it so that he could get trained to be a nurse practitioner. And he's like big and burly, so I think it's really cute, big burly guy to be a nurse practitioner. And he's excited to do like combat medicine in the field. Yeah, that's the one who has a kid who's 21, all of 21, and already married with children. Okay, I think I'm better now with the wax. So sorry about that if that was ridiculous to watch me do that. That is very cool, but he won't be a professional. Oh, I know. I asked him about that because he's visiting for the holidays, and asked him if he had considered becoming a doctor instead because of that. And he said, no way, not his cup of tea. Only doctors are professionals and chiropractors. LOL. I know, it's so stupid. It's so ridiculous. I don't think it'll last, but it is very insulting, even temporarily. I hope you knew I was kidding. So yeah, let's talk about what had happened. We know that Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer, went to Conan O'Brien's party. They asked if they could bring their 32-year-old son because they were worried about leaving him home alone. He'd been very unstable. So, he'd been in and out of treatment like 17 or 18 times, but I think all in a pretty short period of time. Like most of those treatment cycles were between the time he was 15 and 18, I think, because once he turns 18, the parents lose some of that ability. I mean, they had ways of leveraging him with basically money and offering him a place to stay conditionally. So he did have, I think, about 3.5 years of homelessness from the time that he was 18 until about 21 and a half. And he lived, I think, in Maine, in Portland, Oregon, and Austin, Texas, and maybe Miami, Florida for a little bit. And he did the types of things that people do when they're homeless and trying to score and don't have any money. He dumpster dove for food. He slept under bridges, and he did odd jobs to make some money. And then he around that time, around the time of being 21-ish, is when he came home. He asked his parents if they would take him in. They said they would, as long as he got sober. And then he went to another program. So that was probably the 18th one. And while he was there, he was interacting with one of the other participants, and they were kind of like writing notes, making like a sitcom about their experience with using and with rehab and all that. And then the kid, sorry, Nick, ran the idea by his dad, and his dad thought it was an interesting idea, but thought, rather than a sitcom, why don't you see if you could flesh it out into a movie? And they had like a 30-minute sketch of a show, and then they enhanced it to be like an hour's worth of a show. And then eventually, as you know, Being Charlie was made into a movie. And then when they were promoting the movie, Rob and Nick and the friend that co-wrote the screenplay, and I think it's a top-notch movie. I think it's a brilliant screenplay. But when they were promoting it, Rob Reiner took the helm and kind of took the lead with all the interviews and everything. And it's really devastating and uncomfortable to watch those interviews. You can see plain as day Nick like rolling his eyes. At times he looks like he's going to throw up. At times he looks like he's checking out. He's sneering. He's obviously not happy about his father taking the helm. Sometimes he has a lot of trouble getting a word in edgewise, and it's his story. It's his story. So as much as I'm a Rob Reiner fan and supporter, it's unfortunate. So you can really see the heartbreaking dynamic. And let me see what you're saying, Annabise. It's so sad. People have mental health issues and end up homeless, but now it's anyone that can be homeless. Young people can't afford a house payment. Not that rent is any cheaper. So I was trying to tell the story. Before he got homeless, he had been living in their guest house. So when he was 18, I think, he was living in the guest house, and they went away for a week or a weekend, and he freaking trashed the place. He absolutely destroyed everything, and he talks about it in a couple of interviews. $30,000 worth of damage when they came home. And then that was when they kicked him out, and he was homeless for 3.5 years. So then when he came back, from the research that I've done, I don't believe that he ever moved back into the guest house. That when they let him come back at 21, before they made the film, that the condition was that he would live in the home with them so that they could keep an eye on him. But that was 10 years ago. So somewhere in there, I could be screwing up the timeline. I apologize. It was my understanding that for about the last 5 years, he had been living in the house, and that he was living in the house currently. He was not living in the guest house. I think that that's misinformation, that he had lived in the guest house before, and because he trashed it, they weren't trusting him with it. So we know that he went to the party with them. They were afraid of leaving him home alone, and it doesn't seem like he wanted to go to the party. He wore a black hoodie, and this was, I guess, like a black tie event at Conan O'Brien's house. And he was really rude and offensive, allegedly, according to multiple guests, multiple witnesses. And then him and his dad may have gotten into a yelling match. And then there's many accounts that Rob and Michelle left the party. But I saw one person's account that knew them well that said, they wouldn't have left the party after something like that, that they were so used to being embarrassed and humiliated and put out by Nick, that they would have just taken that in stride. But I don't know. It sort of sounds like they left the party. Um, Conan's home is about 4 miles away from their home. And so I think it was around 1:30, maybe 2 in the morning. And sorry if I'm screwing up the timeline, but I'm just kind of trying to flesh out a general idea of what I've gathered. And they know this from Michelle's smartwatch, that her heart rate was like the heart rate of someone sleeping, and then it was the heart rate of somebody waking up, the heart rate of somebody fighting for their life, and then nothing. And that was all like a 6-minute period. So, and trigger warning, the autopsies came in and they have a pretty good idea about the sequence of events, that the mom and the dad were asleep in the same bed. Nick entered the bedroom and attacked his father, and his father woke up but lost the fight quickly. And then Michelle was trying to back up into the bathroom when Nick was attacking her, and she has defensive wounds that, and just from, again, trigger warning, from the blood splatter and everything, that, they have a pretty good picture of, she was backing up to go trying to get shelter or safety in the bathroom when he was attacking her. And so she was in the bathroom when her remains were found. So that's why they said that they were in 2 different rooms, and why the daughter, Romy, found the father in his room, but then immediately left the room. And then I think her boyfriend went in and saw the mom. But it's possible that that nobody entered until the first responders got there. But I think they did. I think that he went in there. He was probably wondering where the mom was. He was probably concerned, like, wanted to make sure that there was no pulse on Rob. And then when he found the mom, probably wanting to make sure that there was no pulse there too. There's been a couple of reports, but I don't think that they're accurate, that the mom had not passed and that she was able to communicate that Nick had done it. But I don't think that's accurate. I think that's speculation and that it's inaccurate. I think that that her life was ended well before the help arrived. That's my opinion. Parents are at one time or another toxic to their children. Yeah, we are. Absolutely. I mean, it is hard navigating teenagers. It's hard navigating children, but yeah, as they grow up, and then as they're moving out of the house and trying to separate, and you want your kids to be independent and healthy. So yeah, it's devastating. It doesn't seem like Nick is the only kid that didn't really, had that like failure to launch. It kind of seemed like Romy had a failure to launch too. And I don't know about Jake, the older brother. Not so sure. It sounded like he had a job. But this family was so incredibly wealthy, and it just doesn't seem like the 2 younger siblings were real motivated to get their careers going. But, they didn't need to. I mean, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And the Reiners, I think, had an estimated $200 million estate or trust. So it's a dubious situation. People, of course, want to criticize Nick, and yeah, if he did this, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. And I still think we need to keep an open mind that if he was doing rugs, there is a possibility that there was a bad rug deal, and that cartels or something like that could have been involved. And I think, the Occam's razor, of course, the most likely, simplest answer is that he just lost his freaking mind and did this. It's very calculated. So he used a sharp-edged object. It sounds like one of the kitchen knives is probably missing, and it doesn't sound like they've recovered the actual instrument that he used. I think that the LAPD and private investigators are searching like every storm drain and every dumpster imaginable, but my guess is that it's unlikely that they'll find the weapon. So yeah, I think that kind of covers most of it. So then he went from the home. It sounds like he cleaned up at the home. That there was about 45 minutes from the time that the lives were taken until he actually left the house. And this is just more insult to injury. Of course, he commandeered their Mercedes to drive himself to the hotel. He went to a hotel across the street from the Santa Monica Pier. I know the area very well. It used to be my old stomping grounds. He checked in at 4:30 in the morning. He had the person that checked him in said that he had the cash on his person in his jacket, like crumpled up, and that he was very disheveled, and that the person, the employee from the hotel, thought that he was probably on some substances. But of course you would. I mean, 4:30 in the morning. But basically that he seemed strung out, and that it was odd that the money was like crumpled up inside his jacket, but also that there wasn't any of the red stuff that the employee noticed. So then the story is that the room was full of the red stuff, that the red stuff was all over the bed and all over the floor and all over the shower. So it makes me wonder if he had been cut up pretty bad himself. Because, yeah, it definitely sounded like Rob had woken up and tried to get the weapon from him. And then after this is what I thought was really weird too, because the hotel has all that surveillance, like I was saying, but they said that they had surveillance of him inside the room, just sitting and staring at the wall for like 5 hours. But unless that surveillance is like his own cell phone, like I don't think hotels would have surveillance inside of rooms. I don't get that. But I do think that our phones are watching us all the time, and maybe in a situation like this, they can tap into those records. So anyway, the report is that he sat in the hotel room staring at the wall for 5 hours. And of course, he put a sheet over the window, which was also peculiar. And then at some point, hours later, like 4:30 in the afternoon, he went to a part of town, like I want to say South Compton, like basically Watts. I mean, the rough part of town, I think, where you would go to score. I'm pretty sure that I know he went to a rough part of town where you would go to score, but I think that that is probably where he went, like Compton, Watts, near USC. So, that's like south of the airport, I think, or USC. Their airport is south of USC. You pass by USC on the way to Anaheim, I think. It's been so long. But anyway, he wasn't far from the University of Southern California campus in a ghetto area. And I think when he went into the convenience store that we've probably all seen the videotape footage of him wandering in there, he might have been purchasing alcohol. He might have had 4 alcohol drinks in his hotel room. I found something about 4 alcohol drinks. If you want to chime in, Annabes, if you know any of the deets. I'm just trying to flesh out a pretty fairly accurate picture of how things went down. And then when he was spotted in the store, then they tackled him and arrested him outside of the store after he bought the alcoholic beverage. Yeah. Was Michelle Nick's mom? Yeah, Michelle was Jake, Nick, and Romy's mother. Rob Reiner had been married previously to Penny Marshall, and Penny Marshall had a daughter when she was 19 years old with somebody that she had been married to. And then Rob adopted that daughter. So his older daughter is 61. But then the 3 kids that he had with Michelle, I think Jake is 34, Nick is 32, and Romy, I think, is like 27-ish. So yeah, that's a good question. So, what's fascinating is that not only Rob and Michelle had some affiliation with Biggly Piggly, but Penny Marshall and her family had a lot of connection. Those families went back generations, at least one generation in the Bronx. So Carl Reiner and Fred Trump had some knowledge of each other as they were living in the same neighborhood and starting their families. Although Donnie is like the second to the youngest, I think, of his 4 siblings. There's 5 kids, and the oldest, I think, is maybe 10 years older than him. So Rob Reiner has some siblings too. But anyway, Biggly Piggly and Rob Reiner are just a year apart. Rob Reiner was 1 year older. No, he'd be 1 year younger. Oh, this is the first time I realized Rob Reiner was 1 year younger. Because Biggly Piggly 79, Rob Reiner 78. I don't know how I got that backwards, man. Okay, so I'm glad I clarified that for myself. Sorry about that. And then Michelle Singer was 70. There were inaccurate reports that she was 68 at the time that she lost her life, but she was 70. So anyway, back to the families growing up in the same neighborhood in the Bronx and having generational interactions and knowledge of each other. Also, Penny Marshall's brother, Gary Marshall, who's a famous producer, and he's a lot older than Penny, I think. He had an affiliation with the Trump family as well. But Penny Marshall, her family was, I believe, from Manhattan. I don't think that they were from the Bronx. So she grew up in a very fancy, I almost said hotel, building that a lot of fancy, famous kids grew up in. I can't remember them off the top of my head. I should probably grab my phone. I haven't looked at my phone once. Do I even have it with me? I should. See, I have just figured out how to use this thing on my wrist. There, where I can find it because it fell. Let me try that again. Is it in my purse? No. I'm so glad I have this dumb thing on my wrist because I would never find it. I think it probably fell under the chair. Let me see if I can get it. Well, even with my little spy gadget, I might have to give up. I might not be able to find it. I can hear it. That is so ridiculous. That is hilarious. Man, I drive myself nuts. This is why I wanted metal braces and not Invisalign, because I figured I'd lose them. I figured I'd lose them all day, every day. So it's down there, but I can't freaking see it. It's just not meant to be. I'm just going to have to forget about it. How frustrating. Because you know me, I'm so dependent on my cell phone when I'm live. I wanted to look stuff up and read to you. Damn it. Some really interesting stuff. But, you know, some of like the people that grew up in the same fancy apartment building that Penny Marshall grew up in. And the home in Brentwood that the Reiners lived in had previously been owned by Henry Fonda. So Jane Fonda and Peter Fonda grew up in that beautiful Brentwood home. And it really is like a Leave It to Beaver kind of white picket fence kind of place, especially for Hollywood. So, you know, a lot of people in Hollywood like to live out in Malibu, where they kind of have a break from Hollywood and just the natural beauty of the ocean. Of course, it's a long drive and traffic in LA is horrible. So like the Reiners, they had a home, a waterfront home in Malibu, but that was more like their little vacation getaway home. A lot of people that work in the industry, I think, are smart and they live really close to work, basically. So that would be like Brentwood and Bel Air and Calabasas, the one of the canyons. Because yeah, when you're working long hours, it's good to be closer to work. Anyway, yeah, I don't think a hotel room would have surveillance. All of Compton is bad. Yep. My uncle lives in Compton with his family. His oldest daughter was my age. I spent 2 weeks there after graduating high school. I heard Mary Trump's mashed potato story. Oh, I'm glad you heard it. I think Donnie was really young, wasn't he? Like 5. I saw that she did like a 10-minute Christmas video about it, but I didn't watch it. Are you sitting on it? No, I don't think. I mean, it might be under the chair, but the way I've got my, let me see if I push this in the kind of stand that I have my thing on. Like I said, I am just freaking cursed because it's right here. It's not like under the cushion. It's not under me. Um, that is so funny. Like funny, not funny. Don't mess with me, phone. Yeah, it just like slipped away into oblivion. It's right here, but I can't. It's, okay, I really got to give it up. This is so stupid. Let me turn upside down. It's hilarious. Funny, not funny. Oh, I see it. It's like way over here. It like fell and it took off. And when you do your little wrist gadget thing, I got it. I got it, Annabise. Even though it was face up, uh, it didn't light up. Oh my god, I can't wait to have my freaking studio back. This is ridiculous. This is so funny. Okay, I have my phone. I've got my notes. Now, what was I going to look up? So, yeah, it had fallen and then it jumped like 2.5 or 3 feet back there in the corner. And like I said, it was face up, but when you press the stupid button, it doesn't light your phone up. It makes that great noise. I would have never found it ever. It probably would have taken me like a year. Okay. It sounded so close, but it was a few feet away. Okay, mystery solved. Thank you, my dear. What a joke. Hollywood is not a nice area either. Parts of Hollywood are really seedy. There's an area called Silver Lake that's more affordable and not so seedy. And then, some of what they call the Hollywood Hills are not really Hollywood, and it can be really nice, really nice. Yeah, that's all my old stomping ground. The first place we lived the first time we moved to California was kind of right below the iconic Hollywood sign. Like if you went out into the street in front of our house, you could see it. You could just look right at the Hollywood sign. We were on a street called Gale Drive, and it was considered Beverly Hills, but it was a very not fancy part of Beverly Hills. I mean, it was safe. I mean, I don't think there's any parts of Beverly Hills that aren't safe. Safe-ish, you know what I mean? It wasn't Compton. That's what I'm trying to say. But it was more affordable than like the crazy parts of Beverly Hills. Okay, Mary said he was 6 or 7, but then she said that was 40 years ago, or maybe I heard her wrong. Yeah, I know, because the first time I heard her tell this story, I thought that it happened when they were grown-ups. But then when I heard the story a second time, I thought that he was about 5, or like you said, maybe 6 or 7. But yeah, I'll watch her little 10-minute thing, or maybe we can watch it together. That has happened to me before. We went down the street with the stars on it. Let's see. We can play that Mary Trump video, at least a minute of it. Since I have my stupid phone, I did watch the video that she dropped today. I like her channel. She's great. I like to keep up with her. And I just hadn't prioritized watching her little mashed potato story from a day or two ago. Mary Trump and the mashed potatoes story. Oh, let's see. So it's 10 minutes long. What's the rest of the title? Christmas of 2025. Let's see what Mary tells us.
Hello, everybody. It's the holidays, which means that a lot of people are going to be eating mashed potatoes. They seem to be a staple of holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Potatoes show up in some form or another in most holidays. Latkes, for example, which I love. So given that, I thought it was a good time to revisit a story I've told on occasion, this time with a twist. Well, let's start with the infamous Trump family mashed potato story. Many years ago, in a faraway place known as Jamaica Estates, Queens, a young boy of around 6 or 7 years old named Donald was engaged in his favorite activity, tormenting his little brother. In the process of tormenting his little brother, he was driving the rest of his family absolutely up a wall. His mother, who as it turns out happened to be my grandmother, was frantically trying to get dinner on the table before her husband got home. In addition to getting in her way, Donald was also making his older sisters and brother absolutely desperate, because in the process of tormenting his little brother Robert, he was making Robert cry. Not just cry, but scream his head off. Nothing my grandmother said made a difference. Nothing his older sisters, Elizabeth and Marianne, said made a difference. Nothing his older brother Freddie made a difference. Donald would not stop tormenting Robert. In the midst of all of this, my grandmother is continuing to put the family food on the table. The green beans, the pork chops. I don't know exactly what it was. What I do know she did, though, was put on the table a very large bowl of mashed potatoes. How do I know it was a very large bowl of mashed potatoes? Well, because there were going to be 8 people sitting down to dinner. And these were meat and potatoes people. Donald wouldn't stop, and Robert became more and more hysterical. Finally, Donald's oldest brother, Freddie, my dad,
Her
the
dad.
oldest of the Trump sons, came up with an idea. In order to get Donald to stop, Freddie picked up the bowl of mashed potatoes and dumped it on his obnoxious little brother's head. And a miracle occurred.
He was probably
Robert stopped
quiet.
crying. Donald stopped tormenting him. And every single person in the family started laughing at Donald. Now, you would think that would be the end of the story. But no. Because after Freddie died in 1981, to commemorate his memory, I guess, on every holiday, every Thanksgiving and Christmas, my Aunt Marianne would tell the infamous mashed potato story. And every single time, everybody sitting around the table would laugh. Except for one person. And you'll never guess who. That's right, Donald. Donald would sit there with his arms crossed and a scowl, also a pout, on his face. Marianne never tired of telling the story, and Donald never stopped feeling humiliated by it. The end.
They all lived happily ever after.
Not really, though. You know, it's funny. I've told this story very many times. I've written about it. And the last time I heard it was in 2017 when we were at the White House celebrating my aunt's birthdays. Elizabeth was turning 75 and Marianne was turning 80. And we were upstairs in the executive dining room. And Donald had exactly the same reaction he had had for the last 40 years. Crossed arms and a pout on his face. He didn't find it funny. He can't find it funny. He cannot ever find humor. He can't laugh at himself.
That's insane.
Every time I tell that story, though, I feel a little tinge of guilt. Because the truth of the matter is, the person being humiliated by having the bowl of mashed potatoes dumped on his head wasn't Donald the monster who's destroying America and destroying lives around the planet. It was that 6 or 7-year-old kid. And I think that's important. Again, not that any of us should have compassion for Donald, because he has committed horrors that are unforgivable. But we need to have compassion for that kid, because the fact that he never, ever got over that narcissistic injury is an indication of just how unsupported he was as a young child.
Yeah.
Think about it. His entire family stood there laughing at him.
Yeah, I mean, it was a rough time for him, but as he got older, he should have been able to see it from the other side and not be so hung up on it, in my opinion.
Because they so disliked him. They were so unable to control his behavior that was the only way they could think of to rein him in. I don't know if that was Donald's first experience with humiliation, but in that moment, I'm pretty sure he decided that he would do everything in his power ever to avoid being humiliated ever again. In fact, one of his weapons against feeling humiliated would be to humiliate others, something at which he has become incredibly adept.
Here,
Now,
I think I'll stop it there. I mean, it's only got 3 more minutes. Should we watch the rest of it, Annabise? You watched the whole thing. Or I was going to just talk a little bit about like that I've been watching The Apprentice, the movie that came out I think just this year of 2025. And it's very well done. It's kind of hard to watch because you know how much I dislike Donnie Two Dolls, but the actor that plays him is great. So he's pretty easy to watch. But it's just a horrific story, the biography of Biggly Piggly Trumpster Fire. It's an absolutely horrific story. Um, and then Rory Cohn. I mean, Rory Cohn is absolutely the worst. And I'm only about halfway through the movie. I think it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I have about an hour left to watch. But it is very fascinating to learn some of the history of New York City and the buildings that he purchased or tricked people into giving him, and just how he learned to humiliate people and how he learned from Rory Cohen how to be so vicious and how to be a criminal, basically. It's really crazy. So anyway, I wanted to talk about well, before completely departing from the Reiner story, I mentioned in my last video that Nick's older brother Jake was doing some type of work on the Menendez story, and I don't know what that was exactly. It seemed like maybe it was like a mini series or something that he'd been working on as recently maybe as 2024, which is just kind of eerie. This crime that happened at the Reiner's home is really epic, monumental. You know how I kind of think that everything that happens is a distraction, an intentional distraction from the Trumpstein files. I can't help but think that. And I know that in this case, it could be completely batshit crazy. That could be way off the mark. And it also could be spot on. And it's kind of like a twofer to get back at his enemy. I mean, he's been on the revenge tour all year. He's been on the freaking revenge tour all year. But then with the series that Rob Reiner was going to put out, so the Trumpstein files, I think they dropped another million Annabes. Like, who can even keep up? They said that they found another million Trumpstein files. Like, oh, look, what do we have over here? Oh, a million Trumpstein files. It's completely insane. And they're dropping them pretty rapidly and, you know, basically giving the evidence to Congress. And then Congress is making a data bank that we can all look things up on. And part of that it's been so haphazard that you could like copy and paste from the website, and in doing so lose the redactions. So some of the most heinous stories that have come out of the more recent drops, like maybe information from the day before Christmas, there's one story involving a 13-year-old who says that Biggly Piggly was present on a yacht with her and other people in Lake Michigan when one of the other people threw her newborn child into Lake Michigan, extinguishing it. So he was present for that. Then there's that whole story about the woman who was found in Oklahoma with her trigger warning, with her head blown off, and her stepfather, who says that he was driving a cab for Biggly Piggly and got into it with him. And I'm going to just put a link in the description to Boston Brian's live from today, where he goes into great detail about the whole thing. Because it's kind of complicated, but this man made a video about the incident like a year ago, like on TikTok or something like that. And then the documentation of the story just has shown up in the last 48 hours. And the two stories are consistent. So I'll point you to Boston Brian's live for that. And there's so much information that I wanted to talk about. I'm sorry I'm not more organized, but I'm just lucky to be here. How about you, Anna Bees? His dad, I haven't listened to anything in the past few days except for the Mary Trump potatoes story. Let's see. The other thing I want to bring up, Anna Bees, remember Gene Hackman passed away at his home in Santa Fe, New Mexico, I think in February this year. And that was a weird story. And then come to find out that Gene Hackman was on Nixon's enemy list. And because he was on Nixon's enemy list, he was sort of on like a Republican enemy list ever since then. And that story is pretty weird too. I just can't completely buy the Occam's razor case with that. You know, if Gene Hackman's wife passed away at 67, like she was in really good health. Why would she have passed away? And then he was in the home for like a week with Alzheimer's and her not being there to take care of him. And then he's found by the door. There's something about that story that just doesn't sound right. And that was back before I knew about Nixon's enemy list and before I knew about the Republican enemy list. And then just thinking about how it was in the first 90 days of the revenge tour. Virginia Giuffre is right outside of the 90 days. Let's see when Gene Hackman passed away. February 18th of 2025. And then Virginia, I believe, was March or April. I think like March 25th. Let me see. April 25th. So not in the first 90 days of the revenge tour, but the revenge tour hasn't ended. And there are some other really heinous stories that have come out of the more recent files, but those are two of the absolute worst. the woman whose head was blown off, whose stepdad has his account of his story, and then the victim who says that she was being transported for a very long time and she was on that yacht and they unalived her baby. And then there's like reports of women being transported and being kept in cages, which I just have a feeling that there was a lot of that it was kind of like a slave trade, and that people would come to Epstein Island from all over the world to purchase their pick. And that might be similar to what's happening with all the 20 or 30,000 children that Daddy Vladdy has abducted from Ukraine. We've heard stories that there's catalogs online that you can order up what you want. I'm sorry to say that. I wish it wasn't true. I'm lucky to be here too. Yes, I remember that. That's the true about her passing. They said it hantavirus, right? Thank you, Annabise. Yeah, I forgot about that. And sure, it's possible, but it seems so far-fetched. Yeah. I meant that's true. She was young to pass, and she was very healthy. She was very healthy. I think she was like 67, and Gene Hackman was like 95. That's so terrible, Jazz. I wish it wasn't true. I know. Yeah. But what's good is that the information is surfacing, but it is surfacing in such a fashion that it's completely overwhelming and preposterous. Like you hear these stories and they sound far-fetched. They sound like people are just tripping, right? Like, oh, they killed my baby, threw the baby overboard. Or, the thing about the 20-year-old having her head blown off in Oklahoma, like 2 weeks after she reported being raped by Biggly Piggly and Little E. So she finally reported it to the police, and then 2 weeks later was discovered with her head blown off. And then the law enforcement that was at the crime scene said she definitely couldn't have done this to herself. And then the coroner documented that she did this to herself. So, even the thing with Rob Reiner, Biggly Piggly is really trying to say that he did it to himself with his Trump derangement syndrome, that it was sort of natural. It was a natural occurrence from the Trump derangement syndrome because he angered other people who then did this to him. And that it was self-inflicted. I mean, unreal. Absolutely unreal. And I told you about how if you did a search in the document dumps, if you did a search for TRUMP, nothing would come up. But if you did a search for TRUMP with a space, then you'd get a ton of documents with him in them. So, they're just making all kinds of mistakes. And yeah. So the family dynamic, I got my degree in marriage, family, and child counseling, as well as art therapy. And the family dynamic is very important to understand. And Megyn Kelly, of course, disgusting freak that she is accusing the Reiner family of incest. And I just want to bring that out into the open because that is so effed up. People a lot of people have incest in their families. A lot of people. Also, a lot of people have incestuous relationships that aren't necessarily crossing physical boundaries, but they're just inappropriate. Like, even there's a videotape of Rob Reiner and his daughter Romy where she's doing his hair and he's in a barber seat, and she's talking about having a Brazilian butt lift, and they're having a conversation about this, and it's kind of lighthearted and funny, but it's kind of cringy. Like, to me, that's, what I'm talking about, where it's kind of like an inappropriate alignment. I mean, I was uncomfortable watching it. But, Megyn Kelly, to make that accusation, almost makes me think she's working for Donnie Two Dolls and trying to create some other narrative to distract from any type of involvement he could have from any kind of, like, Charles Manson, Jacob's Ladder, Daddy Vladdy type of thing. I mean, that woman is awful. She's just god awful. So Nick is 32 years old. And I don't know that a lot of people know this, Anna Bees. Are you aware that a lot of young men have psychotic breaks at the age of 33? And in the psychiatric world, we call it Jesus age, because Jesus was 33. And it's very typical when he passed away, when he was unalived. It's very typical for people when they're having their psychotic episodes, especially for guys when they're having a psychotic episode, to think that they're God or to think that they're Jesus. So I just think it's interesting that Nick is right in that age range, just a year off, because that's a very real thing in the psychiatric world. So Rob Reiner worked on a movie called God and Country that I think might have some insight into this whole thing. God and Country. It's a documentary, 90 minutes long. It came out in 2024. And it's about Christian nationalism. And I think it's also about white supremacy. I mean, Christian nationalism is white supremacy. So the producers are Dan Partland, Rob Reiner, Steve Oken, Michelle Singer Reiner, and Jeff Oken. So Michelle and Rob worked on some of these things together. The other thing is the LBJ movie, Lyndon Johnson movie. I'm going to look up when that was. Lyndon Johnson movie, because that seems like it would be good to watch also. That was produced in 2016, which is interesting because that was around the same time that the Being Charlie came out. Didn't Being Charlie come out right around 2016? 2015. So yeah, I wonder if it distracted Rob's ability to fully focus on Being Charlie if he was working on the Lyndon B. Johnson movie too. Very, very interesting. So these are things on my watch list. I'm going to finish The Apprentice. I'm going to watch God and Country, and I'm going to watch the LBJ movie. And Tracy is the 61-year-old daughter that was Penny Marshall's biological kid that Rob Reiner adopted as his own. So Tracy Reiner is the oldest of the 4 kids. And Penny Marshall had her when she was 19 with her first husband. And let's see. So Castle Rock is a production company that Rob Reiner was central to, and Castle Rock even had a lot to do with Seinfeld being produced and with Curb Your Enthusiasm. So Rob Reiner was a heavy hitter. I mean, we all know that, but I didn't realize that he was tied into Castle Rock. I mean, I haven't followed his career that closely. And then Curb Your Enthusiasm is where Cheryl Hines, RFK Jr.'s current wife, finally broke through with her career. So when she first moved to Hollywood back in 1993, about she was hired by Michelle Singer Reiner to help organize Rob Reiner's 50th birthday party. So she was just hired like part-time for that specific project. And then she ended up being their full-time assistant for 5 years. And then she finally got her break eventually in Curb Your Enthusiasm due to her good friend Rob Reiner. And then now she's married to RFK Jr. And I think that is an interesting fact too, just like the book cover that Michelle photographed, and just like the Daddy Vladdy, Bigly Piggly connection that Rob Reiner had been really focused on for the last 9 years of his life. And, you know, I mean, that whole Russia thing is, I think it's Bigly Piggly's kryptonite, don't you, Annabise? Let's see. That's so terrible, Jazz. I wish it weren't true. Yes, that sounds far-fetched. I know the thing about the baby and the thing about the 20-year-old. They sound outlandish. But while they're putting these documents out there for the public, they're just completely overwhelming everybody and doing it while people aren't paying attention because it's Christmas, right? But I believe it. So Bigly Piggly is directly threatening us. I agree, but I'm not sure what you meant by that. That was like 10 minutes ago almost. But yeah, he said in his Christmas post to everybody that he hates, he said that this might be your last Merry Christmas. Was he planning on blowing up the world? I mean, seriously. We could pass from TDS. Oh, yeah. OMG. It is very toxic. It is absolutely toxic. And it's not just about him. I mean, he's just a freaking puppet. It's all the people around him. It's all the heavy hitters in all the financial titans of New York and of the world that are propping him up. He's just a meat puppet. I mean, he thinks he's all that in a bag of chips, which is what makes him such a perfect meat puppet, right? OMG, I had no idea that Megyn Kelly said that. She is so disgusting. I can't stand her. She is the biggest piece of crap imaginable. Remember all that crap she was saying about 15-year-olds, how they're like barely legal? It's like, no, they're not. They're not legal. Like maybe a 17-year-old, still not barely legal, still illegal. 18, you could say barely legal. Oh, for sure she is covering for Bigly Piggly. No, I had no idea that it was common in the psych world. So, you know, I'm the only channel that I know of that's talking about this crazy conspiracy theory possibility, Charles Manson type of thing. But I was looking around, poking around on the internet, and I found some little patches of places where other people were thinking the same thing, of course. And I found that fascinating because I know that I can kind of run with things sometimes, but it seems like too often it's accurate. I mean, like freaking Idaho 4, OMG. I did check out a little bit about the stuff that Jules of All Trades has been posting. So Molly in Idaho 4, Molly is the person who delivered the DoorDash food. So now she's the key witness that they never mentioned, and that a lot of her testimony is exculpatory 100%. That's just freaking nuts. Doesn't surprise me at all, though. And then I remember when Jonathan, what is the name of his channel? JLR. I can't think of his name, but you guys know the channel JLR. He's like always getting in everybody's face, love him or hate him. He's controversial. I remember him going to the Taco Bell immediately in the Idaho 4 case and trying to find out if Molly still worked there and getting the door slammed in his face. And good for him that he has the motivation to do that. I mean, I would never do anything like that, but I'm glad that he does, you know. I remember he was one of the people that like camped out in front of the Laundrie's house when the Gabby Petito story was going on. And he came to Springfield, Ohio when the dog cat eating situation was blowing up. And it's about to blow up again because they're about to deport all those Haitians, which is going to completely derail the city of Springfield. It's going to collapse. And our governor, DeWine, who's a complete doofus, because he still backs Biggly Piggly, even though he's completely at odds with him over this issue. He's just spineless. So he's freaking out because Springfield's going to be destroyed without all the Haitians that keep the city running, and they don't eat the freaking cats and dogs. It's craziness. No, I had no idea that it was common in the psych world. Yeah, the Jesus effect, Jesus age 33. I do think that it's Biggly Piggly's kryptonite. Yeah, Russia is totally his kryptonite. And for him to say that it's a hoax and Russia, like Marsha is ludicrous. It's like, dude, you're like in bed with Daddy Vladdy. Daddy Vladdy has something over you, whether it's the P tapes or the Bubba photographs or all of the above. I mean, yeah, he's heavily involved with Russia. Yeah, he is. He's an asset. He's definitely an asset. What I meant was Biggly Piggly is threatening us by saying we could have some misadventure because of having Trump derangement syndrome. Right, totally. Well, oh my goodness. I don't want to say it because I feel like it is definitely where he's headed. And I think that we can create realities with our words, but I also think that we need to call things out so that we can identify them. If he can create this Trump derangement syndrome as a threat to your own well-being, he can potentially make it illegal to not like him. He can make it so that their Nazi party of fascists, Christian nationalists can jail you or deport you or do whatever they want to you if you don't like Trump. And if you voice that you don't like Trump, or if you've ever voiced that you don't like Trump or that you didn't like him. So, you know, I mean, he's so egotistical. If you say you love him now, he'll forgive everything. But yeah, Like, I totally think that that's where they're going with it. I absolutely think that that's his goal. 100%. It's completely effing nuts. So what else? You know what Biggly Piggly does, his main MO that he learned from Rory Cohn is to exploit your enemies and to keep them living in fear. So if he had anything to do with Nick Reiner's pathology, psychopathology, and the crimes that it looks like Nick probably committed, then he's exploiting Nick's mental health issues. He's exploiting Nick's animosity towards his father. He's exploiting Nick's propensity towards substance abuse and addiction. And then part two of exploiting your enemies is to make them live in fear. Like, how come Barack Obama hasn't come out and made more statements about what him and Rob and the wives were going to be meeting for? Like, I doubt that they were just meeting for a nice dinner when they were planning on meeting last Sunday, December 14th. And, you know, it was Michelle Obama that's really spoken out about it, both in posts and in going on with Jimmy Kimmel or one of the talk shows and discussing it. Obama's hardly said anything. And that makes me think that he's living in fear of discussing. I mean, even if there's nothing there, even if it's a nothing burger, like, why wouldn't you just talk about this horrible tragedy with your friends that you were getting together with that same effing day? See, I think they were probably talking about the project, the series, the spy and the asset. That's the name of that freaking series. Democrats need to step up. Yeah, don't we? Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with the Democrats and Republicans is really just keeping the American population at odds with each other, especially now with, you know, it's never been like a war. It's always been just like an argument, you know. Now it's like all the freaking political violence is ridiculous. It's so out of control. And then for the Republicans to say that the Democrats are so violent, it's like completely the pot calling the kettle black, and just that whole like projection and every accusation is a confession. I am over all of it. I know, my dear, I know. So Caroline with a K, she just announced that she's pregnant again. Again, another distraction. Like, really? You're telling us today that you're pregnant? And the last time she took maternity leave, I think she took like 3 days off. She had her baby in July, and then the day that Biggly Piggly pretended to get his ear shot off, she went back to work. She just came running back, and she's been back ever since. So just because she's planning on having another baby, I think the baby's due in May, we can't expect that that's going to give us a break from her for more than like a minute. Okay, so I really want to talk about this whole other thing before we wrap up. The NASCAR driver that crashed the airplane, right? And that guy, I know I looked up his name. I could look it up again. Um, he did some rescue helicopter work, or with his Cessna. Actually, I think it was with his small plane. He did a bunch of rescue work with the Hurricane Helene that was prior to Trump's second administration. So it was under Biden's administration. But I just found out that the owner of that fiber optic company, the Boca Raton thing that I'm always going back to, the family that owned USCOM, um, US Infocom LLC is the name of the company in Boca Raton that Robert Stark, father and son, owned and operated. So Robert Stark was the father, and then there was his son that he had just appointed to be the CEO of the company, and then there was the 17-year-old daughter or granddaughter that was also on that airplane, and it crashed 10 minutes after takeoff. And I didn't realize that it was so similar to that accident last week with the NASCAR driver. I also didn't realize that Robert Stark had done a bunch of rescue aid with his with his Cessna. So I'm thinking, not only, he had this fiber optic multi-billion-dollar company with all kinds of contracts, government contracts, but he also would lend aid to rescue situations. So is that part of Biggly Piggly's annihilation plan, is to get rid of anybody who's going to be able to help in these disasters? Obviously they got rid of FEMA. So who's the NASCAR driver? Greg Biffle. That was the guy whose Cessna crashed. So when that airplane crashed, it had taken off. They were having mechanical problems, and they turned around and landed, and then they crashed. And it's just so weird that both of those happened 10 minutes after takeoff. I don't know that the Boca Raton crash that was earlier this year, I think it was late January. It was January 29th, right? It was, or no, that was the Black Hawk and the American Airlines flight, but it was really close to there. Let's see, Boca Raton. That was April. Yeah. So the IT communications firm was one thing, but then the offering and rendering rescue aid was another thing. And just weird. I mean, when planes crash, they usually crash during takeoff or landing, but it is weird that they both were in the air for 10 minutes, basically. So many stupid similarities in these cases, like the similarities with Ivana falling down the stairs the day before those 3 big depositions. I've heard one content creator say that Ivana had a deposition scheduled the next day too. I think they're incorrect. I think it was just Ivanka, Don Sr. and Don Jr. But it was also 2 weeks and 2 days after Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced. And I think that that's significant. I wonder if there's significance to Pete Hegseth getting married to his current wife, who was his boss at Fox News. Um, they got married 9 days after little E was Epsteined. 9 days. And they got married at a Trump golf course in Jersey, a national golf course owned by Trump. I would think that they had it planned longer, but I don't know. I don't know. And now all of this information is coming up about William Barr and that other fat slob. Sorry, no body shaming. That disgusting freak that reminds me so much of William Barr, Steve Bannon. Those two to me are almost like the same devil with different names and different faces. Steve Bannon and William Barr. I've always known that they've been deep in the dark bullcrap, but their names are coming up a lot in these Epstein files that are getting dropped. She immediately got preggo after having a baby. Well, she had the first baby before she even married the guy that's more than twice her age. I wonder if he's even the dad. For all we know, Biggly Piggly could be the real dad or anybody else. And then he married her for whatever reason. I mean, he's like a billionaire. She's like the daughter of a billionaire. He was like 30 years older than her. She was like 26 probably when they got married. So they got married after the baby was born. I think they got married like Christmas of 2024, but the baby was born in July of 2024. And so here we are, 2025, and she's been pregnant for a few months, it sounds like, if she's due in May. They are all gross. And Alan D. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Alan, I'll just say his name, Dershowitz, because some people might not know his name. So one of the Epstein survivors, her name is Lisa Phillips, I think, and she has her own YouTube channel. And she is the one who on the courthouse or on Congress steps said, we'll make our own list. Like we know who was there. We all know what happened. She's been on the talk show circuit discussing that aspect of all of the 1,200 survivors in the Epstein files, getting together and comparing notes and, being able to piece together what happened to them by hearing each other's stories and seeing the patterns and the same people that they would get transported to and the same institutions that they would get transported to. So there was one or two educational facilities, I think one in Boston. So I think they're probably talking about Harvard, which is where Alan D. has been a professor for like 60 years. And we all know that one other professor just had to step down after some of the e-files were dropped and he was in them. But how disgusting that Harvard is a part of this. And we're going to get the most information from the financial matters, follow the money. But when is that coming? When is that coming? And then as I'm saying that, I'm remembering that isn't Harvard where Mark Z was going to school when he allegedly invented Facebook with a friend of his that really his friend invented it, but then he stole it and ran with it. Wasn't he at Harvard also? And they were basically using it to stalk the chicks. They were using it to like rate the co-eds. And sure, I mean, that's prolific at every college campus and, the whole boys will be boys bull crap. But, Harvard, come on, like you're above that. You should be above that. You should be progressive. You should be fighting for equality. Harvard has been really corrupt with all this crap. It's very unfortunate. And this must be why, because there's a lot of dirt on them. There's a lot of dirt on everybody. So it seems like Rory Cohn was the one who introduced Biggly Piggly to the idea of having dirt on everyone and videotaping and audio taping everyone so that you can manipulate and get what you want. And I think that's still happening, and it's going to continue to happen. I mean, how many people in Congress are in the e-files and doing everything they can to try to squirm out of being held accountable for what they did? I don't know where Mark Z went to school. I can look it up. So let me maybe read you something before we wrap up, because there's a lot of good information that I had come across that I wanted to share. Let's see. Zuckerberg. So gross. And remember that he is that he went boots on the ground looking for Kylie. Where's Kylie? We lost our friend. Yeah, I think it is Harvard. Yep, he went to Harvard. Screw them, man. So let me see, but I do need to wrap up too. Maybe I'll just read you the thing about the Boca Raton. The family of Boca Raton plane crash victims released a statement, asked for privacy as they continue to grieve. And I want to really hit home that the name of the company that Robert Stark started is really hard to find. Even though I've known the name of the company, it's such a simple name and I always forget, and I'm always trying to look it up, and it's like so crazy hard to find. The family of 3 people killed aboard a small plane that crashed Friday morning in Boca Raton has released a statement following the tragic incident. In a statement obtained Saturday, the family said each victim was loved deeply by friends and family, wanting to thank everyone for their condolences and support in this difficult time, and asked for privacy as they continue to grieve. Robert Stark, 81, of Boca Raton, Stephen Stark, 54, of Delray Beach, and Brooke Stark, 17, also from Delray Beach, were all aboard the Cessna 310 plane that went down about 10:20 a.m. on Military Trail near Glades Road after departing the airport, according to the FAA. The plane was headed to Tallahassee International Airport when it crashed. According to the statement, Robert, Stephen, and Brooke were grandfather, father, and daughter. So they must have turned around and come back, because they were in the air for 8 to 10 minutes. And Military Trail Road is where the airport is. It's where they crashed, and it's also where the headquarters for their business is. That is crazy. I don't think that was the thing I wanted to read you, though. Let's see. And yeah, the name of the company is US Info-Com LLC. Just that simple name. And it's so hard to find the name if you don't know the name. If you look that up, you can learn a lot about the business. But I'm going to read you a little bit more about the granddad, who was 81 years old. This is his obituary. It is with profound sadness that we announce the passing of Robert George Stark, 81, who died tragically alongside his beloved son, Stephen Stark, 54, and cherished granddaughter, Brooke Stark, 17, on April 11th, 2025. Born on March 1st, 1944 in Kaneki, Illinois, He was affectionately known as Bob. He grew up in Bradley, Illinois, attended grade school and high school. He went on to serve in the Air Force from 61 to 64, demonstrating early in life his deep sense of commitment and patriotism. Following his military service, he earned his degree in business from Northern Illinois University in 74. His career began in the telephone industry, eventually leading him to Boca Raton, Florida, where he launched his own company, US Info-Com Incorporated, in 1983. His entrepreneurial spirit and leadership laid the foundation for a family-run business that would carry on his legacy. After retiring in 1999, Bob found new adventure in his lifelong passion for flying with aerobatics. I don't know if I'm saying that word right, aerobatics. He traveled across the country competing in numerous contests, eventually earning a place on the World U.S. Advanced Aerobatic Team and becoming the U.S. Advanced Aerobatic Champion in 2004. An extraordinary accomplishment at any age. But he couldn't fly his plane to Tallahassee for his granddaughter to look at the college. For the past 20 years, Bob and his loving wife of 55 years, Darla, split their time between Florida and their peaceful summer home in the mountains of North Carolina, where they welcomed family and friends, creating memories filled with laughter and joy. Bob is survived by all of his family members, preceded in death. Well, that's not the same thing I was trying to read either, because it was the North Carolina, let's see, Bob Stark with Robert G. Stark, rescue aid in the hurricane. Rescue aid hurricane. I don't know. I'll have to look at this more later. Sorry that I'm just kind of piecing together all my information. It's just craziness. It's just craziness. It's like, yeah, helicopters crash, planes crash. Yeah, there's homicides. But it just seems like there's rashes of these things and the same types of things. And like the whole situation with Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer, is so freaking reminiscent of Sharon Tate's the quadruple homicide that happened there in the Hollywood Hills, or in what was it, like, was it Benedict Canyon? Yeah, Benedict Canyon, Cielo Drive. And again, kind of the twofer, like, knock your enemy off the board by extinguishing them and create a big distraction with this completely over the top, crazy, violent bloodbath, basically. I mean, okay, let me recommend a channel to you guys that I've just discovered, and I thought that he's been doing some really good work on the Rob Reiner case. He has this system that he calls the plaid system. And I'll let you know what the plaid system is after I try to find the name of his channel. Mike Dammann, Dammann. So I took a screenshot of the plaid thing. And oh, it might not have saved though. Yeah, it didn't save. My phone's been all jacked. Or did I might have taken the screenshot on my computer. Let me see if I can look real quick at my photos here before I wrap up. Just to read to you what his plaid thing is. Come on. It's not working. All right. Screenshots. Yeah, plaid. It is priorities, leakage, avoidance, intentions, distancing, and sensitivities, a system for the application of forensic linguistics. What do they tell you first? Include embedded confessions, include distancing languages. What do they want from us? What are they hiding? What triggers them and why? I think that that's fascinating. Like I said, I highly recommend his channel. And yeah, I'm going to wrap up quickly. He looks like he could be AI. Who looks like he could be AI? Oh, Zuck. That's funny. That's cute. All right. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Festivus for the rest of us. Love to you all. And thanks for watching. Hit that like button, drink your water, and see you soon.